Before we start this video, I wanted to say thank you guys for reaching 3,000 subs on the channel. I appreciate your support so much and I love talking sound design with you. So if you have any ideas for a 3K subscribers special, let me know in the comments below. And without further ado, let's start the video. Hey guys, Sharpend here. In this video we're doing a recording experiment. So I came up with this idea last night and I thought about what if I recorded the same phrase or note or chord multiple times and then stacked it on top of each other. But then I thought it's just like unison when you record a bunch of voices to make like a big vocal choir or something like that. And so I thought, what if I recorded a specific chord and I just played it at different rhythms. So for example, I played it once every 2 beats, once every 3 beats, once every 5 beats. And then you'd get times where you have the 2 beats pattern colliding with the once per 3 beats pattern and colliding with the once per 5 beats pattern and so on. And I figured that way you can create some interesting in and out woven unison. So I figured that I'm going to film it and just see what happens with you guys. So I'm going to be using my guitar since it's an acoustic instrument. Every time I'm going to strum it, it's going to sound slightly different due to like variations in speed of my strumming, for example, or I don't know, some random errors and just the fact that it's a real instrument. Other than that, I'm going to be using this microphone right here, the AT2020, and I'm also going to be using my Zoom portable microphone to record a more stereo image to experiment with that later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and record 3 patterns. I'm going to record a pattern that I strum once every 2 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. A pattern that I strum once every 3 beats. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to also make a pattern where I strum once every 5 beats. So something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And I'm going to record probably 2 takes of each, and then I'm going to start layering them on top of each other in my DAW and just see what happens. And who knows, maybe we'll create something magical, I don't know. So I've got a metronome and I'm going to just use it to measure my tempo. And let's start. So now that I've recorded all 3 phrases in my guitar, I'm going to export them into my DAW and check out the recordings with my Zoom, which are stereo, and with my AT2020, which is mono. So in the Zoom we have 3 mics here, 1 in the middle and 2 to the left and the right, and another 2 mics here, so a total of 5 mics. So I think the results should be quite different from one another, but we'll see. Okay, so here we are in FL Studio and I have all of the recordings that I made here. The green ones are the AT2020, which are mono, and the brown ones are the Zoom, which have 5 microphones, so they're stereo. So as you can see, we have the different rhythms. Here we have 1 strum per 2 beats. And here we have the 3 strums per, and the 1 strum per 3 beats. And here we have the 1 strum per 5 beats. And the same thing here. 1 per 2 beats, 1 per 3 beats, and 1 per 5 beats. So let's take a listen to all 3 together. Let's start with the mono ones, with the AT2020. So as you can hear, we don't really hear any sort of detuned unison sound. You can hear some slight differences, and you can hear the additional recordings being layered on top of each other, and it does sound a bit different, but it doesn't have any unison, probably because the guitar stays in tune, so the different recordings are perfectly in tune with each other. So let's hear the Zoom ones. So the same thing here, these ones are way more stereo, but overall you can't really hear any sort of unison happening, except for like sort of like a choir effect when you can hear that there are a lot of strums happening at the same time at certain moments. Let's try them together. So one thing that I did notice is that when you play all of these together, you get a sound, sort of like a pad sound underneath, like a very sustained sound in addition to the strumming. So what I did is I went ahead and just chopped up every different rhythm. So for example, the 1 strum per 2 beats, I've chopped it up to all of the times that I've recorded this pattern. Then I've layered it on top of each other. So we have 5 layers of the 1 strum per 2 beats. And as you can see, there are tiny differences between each take. So we're adding a lot more unison than before. So I checked out how would they sound like together. And this is the 80-20-20, the mono ones. And if you pay attention really well, you can really hear this sort of pad sound way more clearly and in the front. It's just the sustaining, I think, overtones of the chord that once you add a lot of recordings that do the same thing, it gets a lot more noticeable. And here's the Zoom version of the same thing, just all of the layers together at once. So yeah, you can sort of hear this sort of pad sound. So I figured, what if I comped them together and played them at the same time? So we have basically this entire huge stack of recordings with this entire huge stack of recordings. And again, it's a very noticeable sound. So I figured, what if I played with it a bit more? And once I added some autopan, I figured that it does sound more noticeable when you hear it go through one ear to the other. So without autopan, it would sound like this. It's very static, and once you add the autopan, it's a different rhythms or different sections. As you can see, the shapes are a bit different. So if you have earphones or headphones, you could really hear that this sort of sustained sound really moves between your ears and sound more noticeable once you add this sort of panning movement that's happening. And then I figured, okay, so what if I just focus on these overtones, harmonics, this sort of sustained sound? What would I get out of it? So I created a patcher here, and this patcher just sends the audio from the recordings into a few different EQs, and each EQ is basically just a peak. So I'm highlighting a certain overtone or harmonic that I liked. So here's the first one. And here's an additional one. Here's another one. And here's, this is the bass note of the chord, G. So altogether they create a really interesting sound that sounds way less like a guitar strumming, but more like, as I said, a sustained sort of overtone happening over and over. And I've used an EQ to remove the high end because you can still hear a bit of the strumming that way. But once you remove the high end, you get a very sustained sound. It makes it sound more like a pad sound. And one last thing that I figured I should try is to see if I speed it up, it would sound different or more interesting. So I've stretched all of the recordings to stay in tempo. And let's try like 150, for example, and see what happens. So let's remove the filtering first. To me, there's no noticeable difference. Let's try with the filters. So with the filters, once you speed it up too fast, you can sort of hear that there's strumming going on and it doesn't sound like sort of a wave of sound slowly evolving. Let's try even faster, like 200 and something. So now that it's really fast, you can really hear the sustained layer below. Let's try with the filters. Yeah, so once it's too fast, you can sort of hear the movement that's happening with the filter. But once we play it at a very slow tempo, you sort of get a sound that you think it's more like a wave slowly evolving and not just like strums that are very transient based and very like sharp in their transient. So as you can hear in this example, I've slowed it down to 76 BPM and it really sounded more like an ambient sound rather than a very rhythmic sound instead. So for conclusion, I don't think we've managed to create a unison effect, mostly because the guitar stays in tune, even though I play a lot of different takes. Like you can see, there are about 20 takes here. But I think that we did notice that once you add more and more takes, you're going to get a subtle choir effect where each note is slightly off rhythm with the other between the takes, like here, for example, where you have slightly different rhythmic errors here and there. And I've also noticed that you get this sort of sustained sound the more layers you add up. So if you want to add more sustain to your recordings, you can just layer them instead of using compression, for example. And I think that this should be explored further, like try different real instruments, maybe a piano, maybe a violin or something like that. I think it could create some interesting results as well. And I hope you liked this video. I'll see you in the next one. For more content, make sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram as well, and check out my playlists on the channel for other tutorials, track breakdowns, and my music as well.